Welcome back, everyone. The mantra was so beautiful. I almost didn't want to stop it, wasn't it? Welcome to our second or third and final day of the retreat with Dorothy Hunt. I don't have much more to say today, so I will just wish us all a beautiful 3 hours together and hand it over to you, Dorothy. So thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. And thanks for hosting our event, and welcome back, all of you. We've been speaking about and hopefully experiencing a little bit of this that's clear, this clarity that is ever present from a seeing that is not the same as, although it illuminates our thinking and feeling and sensing and all of those things. But most minds kind of tend to sort of place awareness or consciousness in the brain, even though, of course, our whole body is aware. It's aware of the temperature. It's aware of water when you take a shower, the felt sense. It's aware of energies that come and go in your environment. Awareness isn't just located above the head. And even though when awakenings begin, there's this awakening that goes up and out, and there's a sense of being aware of awareness or being aware of the transcendent dimension. But as it begins to move back down into the body, we can have a felt sense of awareness in the heart. The I-E-Y-E of the heart begins to open. And when that happens, then we become much more attuned to love and compassion and unity and oneness, all of those things that feel like they're the movement of the source as it moves in expression through our own being. So we've talked about awareness being the great transformer, but today I want to use another word, which is, at least to begin with, which is love. Love is the great transformer, the great healer. To touch anything with love from this heart of awareness, from this heart that includes the whole world and everything in it. It's very, very healing. So when we're talking about working with conditioning, bringing this loving awareness to it, non-judging awareness to it, is the key, really, to transforming perhaps the conditioning, but at least transforming our relationship to it. So I want to just start today with kind of a meditation on the heart, and invite you to just find a comfortable way to sit. You don't have to be too rigid. And just take a couple breaths into the heart. Obviously, scientifically, these breaths are going into your lungs, but the heart includes the lungs. And we can have a felt sense of breathing into any place in the body. So I would just invite you to imagine, at least, that you're breathing into the heart. And as you do that, let your attention move to the heart. And I'm not just speaking here of the heart that's beating in your chest, but the heart that we share with all things and all beings, if we're able to connect to it, to move or see from that dimension of ourself. And as you move your attention to the heart, you might first notice whether or not that area in you If it's a place, maybe it doesn't even feel like there's a place, but you can notice if it feels open or if it feels closed. And neither one needs to be judged. We're just becoming aware of the heart. Whether it feels defended, like are there walls around it? Does it feel really tender and vulnerable? Is it open and expansive? Does it feel constricted? Nothing is right or wrong here. We're just looking at it through this clarity that just sees what is. But this awareness has no barriers and no boundaries, so it can go anywhere. It can come right through our defenses. It's not threatened by any of them. And so it can touch anything. This love, this awareness, it can touch anything, and actually does if we have eyes to notice. So maybe you can begin to feel into this presence of the heart. I call it the heart of awareness because it includes both the wisdom, you could say the wisdom of emptiness, and the love of everything, simultaneously both. Buddhist tradition will call it prajna, heart-mind. But it's all the heart. Ramana called the self the heart. There's only that. So I want to read to you a translation of a small part of the Vijnana Bhairava Tantra in the Kashmir Shaivism tradition. It goes like this. There is a space in the heart where everything meets. Come here if you want to find me. Mind, senses, soul, eternity, all are here. Are you here? Enter the bowl of vastness that is the heart. Listen to the song that is always resonating. Give yourself to it with total abandon. Quiet ecstasy is here, and a steady, regal sense of resting in a perfect spot. You, who are the embodiment of blessing, once you know the way, the nature of attention will call you to return. Again and again, answer that call. And be saturated with knowing I belong here. I am home. So another way we can just sense this vast heart of awareness is sensing your home ground. Now, the mind may not be able to tell you where to look or where to go or how to access it, but you know because it calls to you. This undivided heart calls to us. It calls to us in our longing, calls to us in our life, in our experience of beauty, in our experience of the body. The heart includes it all. So see if you can just sense into this home ground where everything is welcome. Nothing is refused. Where you can be exactly as you are, where you are, how you are. This heart that we're sensing into, it doesn't hold on to anything, cling to anything, or refuse or reject anything. And it doesn't judge. There is a space in the heart where everything meets. Come here if you want to find truth. Mind, senses, soul, eternity, all are here. Are you here? Enter the bowl of vastness that is the heart. Listen to the song that is always resonating. Give yourself to it with total abandon. Quiet ecstasy is here, and a steady, regal sense of resting in a perfect spot. You who are the embodiment of blessing. Once you know the way, the nature of attention will call you to return. Again and again, answer that call. And be saturated with knowing, I belong here. I am home. And once you sense into your home ground, you can drop a question into that space. If you like, if there's an important question, a deep question, a burning question, you can drop it into this vast heart space. And then listen. Don't try to do anything with your question. Just let it rest in this heart and listen. And maybe you will only hear silence, which may quiet the question. Or maybe you will hear something that comes to you in words or in a felt sense. Just listen. Listen from the heart. And whether or not you have a deep question, perhaps you will discover there's some bit of untruth in you that wants to be touched by truth. Some part of you that feels unloved, that's longing to be touched by love. Some fear in you that wants to be touched by the fearless. Let truth touch the untruth. Let love touch the unloved. Let the fearless touch fear. And let yourself feel it or sense it in any way that it comes to you. So if there is some place or places that feel unmet, let the heart meet them here. If there is anything that wants to be forgiven in yourself, let the heart touch it. Let love touch it. Not because you should forgive, but because all is already forgiven in this vast heart. And now let's spend a few moments with a loving kindness meditation that you say to yourself, first of all, may I be well, may I be free from suffering, may I be at peace, may I come home to the love in my own heart. May I be well, may I be free from suffering, may I be at peace, may I come home to the love in my own heart. And really feel into the loving kindness that wants to be directed at you, in you, toward you, around you. May I be well. May I be free from suffering. May I be at peace. May I come home to the love in my own heart. And then let yourself direct this loving kindness toward someone that you care about. And you can use the same words, but may you be well. May you be free from suffering. May you be at peace. May you come home to the love in your own heart. And really feel this love being directed and sent to whomever you choose, as someone you care about, whose well-being you care about. May you be well. May you be free from suffering. May you be at peace. May you come home to the love in your own heart. And feel how this love really does not have a barrier. It can come through distance, through air, beyond the grave. This love can be extended and received from anywhere, at any time, in any place. There's a great power in this love, the power of transformation. And now choose someone who has been very, very hard to love. Maybe you would even call them an enemy, someone that you really haven't wanted to feel love for, perhaps for a very long time. But know that if that person were free from suffering and at peace, you would not be having a problem with them. So it behooves us to send this loving kindness to even those folks that are hardest to love in our own experience. And see if you can. And if you can't, then come back to yourself, because you need more love. But if you are able, begin to send some loving kindness toward a person or those folks who you really have felt were incredibly challenging to love. And you can wish them well, because if they were well and free from suffering, your relationship with each other would be quite different. So may you be well. May you be free from suffering. May you be at peace. And may you come home to the love in your own heart. May you be well. May you be free from suffering. May you be at peace. And may you come home to the love in your own heart. And as I said, if this feels difficult and there's a big no, I can't do it, just come back to yourself and send loving kindness once again to yourself. And now before the bell, let's just spend a moment sending this loving kindness, the energy of loving kindness to one another here in our group. We don't have to say any particular words, but just begin to feel it emanate from your heart to each of our hearts, because we are connected in this heart that we share. And see if you can both feel it emanating from you, and also if you can feel yourself receiving it. And perhaps instead of a bell, we can just open our eyes and continue for a moment sending this loving kindness to one another. Okay, we won't have to hear a bell. The bell has been just our good wishes that we're sending to each other. So yeah, many blessings to each one of you and much love. So, does anybody want to share anything that might have come up in this rather lengthy exploration of the heart? Victoria, and then we'll come back to Jeff. Yeah. So unmute, Victoria. You can't unmute yourself? Okay,
Oh,
there
now
you
I
go.
have, yeah.
You did
I had
it.
a side, yeah. I had a side. I'll just share to say thank you for that lovely meditation. It's just so, I don't even know if it had words. It was just beautiful. I just melted into it. I found it a lovely meditation. So that was my experience.
Okay.
It was really lovely. So yeah, much appreciated. So thanks, Dorothy. But it did all, yeah, it was just, it was a nice place for just rest in.
You could touch into your home ground.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, and then you don't and then when you like that, it's just this overwhelming of just love, that can pour through, and sometimes it's like you forget like just how beautiful we all are and the world is, and it's nice just even for a minute or two to rest in that. So that was my experience. It was lovely. So much
Well,
appreciated.
as the poem said, the nature of attention will call you to return again and again. So, we don't have to make it just a tiny moment in our lives, but we can return to our home ground at any point, really. Just getting that felt sense of it lets you know the way. And like I say, I mean, for some people, there's a bodily sensation of the heart area that's not just the heart that's beating. For some, there's no sort of sense of place, but there's a felt sense. I'm home. This is it. Whatever. Do you know? So it isn't. It's each of us finding our own way in that respect. So, yeah. No efforting there, huh?
Not today. No, that was lovely. Yeah.
You didn't have to effort.
I didn't have to welcome. I didn't have to
anything.
welcome anything. It's just like lovely marshmallow. Just whatever was there, it can.
Wow.
Yeah, I didn't. Yeah. And when you said everyone send love, receive, and just. I could just feel it that way. I could really feel it.
Good.
Yeah, it's very powerful and lovely. So that was my sharing.
And in terms of the efforting, you see, when we're in touch with this heart that's always full and it's empty in the sense that it contains everything, but it's also full of everything, and it's welcoming of everything, and there's nobody who needs to do it because it's already here, and that's the piece where we become more and more transparent as something separate and feel into this that is always here, ever present, we could say.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. Thank
Victoria. Jeff, you had your hand up, I believe. Nice to see you. I'm trying to unmute. Da-da-da-da. There you go. Hi.
Hi. What was so impactful was when you asked us to open our eyes, and the enclosure of aloneness that I live in so often, the enclosure of aloneness, it just melted for a moment, and I had that sweet sensation in my heart. So it's been a bit of a reach for me to be a part of this, and something is happening differently, and it occurred as we opened our eyes. So I don't have anything more profound to say. I just
that was profound enough. Yeah.
I feel included.
Great. And I mean, here we are, we're not in person, so there's already, a sense of perhaps separation just by all of these, rectangles that seem to divide us. And yet we can even look at the screen, the darkness of the screen as this background of mystery that actually includes everything and everyone, including all of us here today. So I'm really happy that you could feel a moment of being less alone. Yeah. Because I understand. I'm widowed, and there are moments of feeling alone in that, and yet we're never truly alone. This is always with us. So I'm glad I'm glad you've come. I'm glad you're part of our group. Yeah, many blessings, Jeff.
So
Yeah.
reassuring. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Is Catherine trying to find the hand? Okay, don't bother with the hand. Okay, you found it, but just unmute yourself.
There we go.
There you go. Hi.
Yes, I was just, I was touched from the very beginning when you started talking about the heart, and it just, sometimes it can just feel so open that there's no boundary, no barrier between it and anything. And yet I did sense sort of a wanting or a grasping. And so part of the answer to the question was just let go. So I was able to relax even more and just sit without leaning toward anything. It was just and there's so many parts of the meditation that were so wonderful. The last part, especially about I guess I was really ready to talk about or to think about the difficulty I have with a sister of mine. And it felt like I could open up to her more than I have sometimes been able to. And I'm very grateful for that, because I sometimes feel so bad about not loving her that much. And it released that in a way that was very welcome.
Great. And then you can see how it might want to move from here. Do you know how this loving kindness might want to move both toward yourself, toward whatever it is you've had to experience with each other? Because sometimes family members can be difficult, and sometimes that's kind of the hardest place for some folks, to really find a place for loving kindness. So lovely.
Yes.
Yeah, lovely. Thanks, Catherine.
Oh, thank you.
Sure. Yeah, Jackie, and then we'll come to Joel. Jackie, go ahead. Unmute.
Thank you.
There you go. Yeah.
I just sank really deep in this meditation. It was wonderful. I wanted to share an experience I had this morning. I'm on the East Coast, so it's already afternoon here. And I was helping to prepare a breakfast outside of the home for people. And so I woke up a little late and definitely in doer mode. I there's something wrong with my shower and blah, blah, blah. And so I got ready and I walked out the door and I remembered, I love what you just said about if you're working with conditioning, love is the transformer. Love is the transformer. So I got out the door and I was just able to stop and look at the sky and look at the beautiful environment in which I live and love it and just love it. So I wasn't directing the love internally, but I was a part of it. I was a part of the environment. And so it wasn't a thought process that I went through of, oh, I should stop and work with conditioning and stuff like that. I just kind of went, oh, and just took a moment. And then I was able to, drive where I needed to go and set up and help, and there without doing, because
Yes.
I was already a part of something so much larger. And it was remarkable.
Mhm.
But I didn't know how remarkable until we went into this meditation. And I was like, oh, it felt like that. It felt interesting.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And like whatever this mystery is that we'll call source or true nature or whatever, it's doing us. So those moments where we're not separating ourselves, either by holding on to this identity of I have to do it, I have to get someplace, I have to make life different. When we're not so much in that, then there's more of a sense of this just flows, right? It just flows, Yeah, there was a difficulty with your shower, and yeah, there were probably moments of frustration at that, and then there was getting up late and still needing to get somewhere, and all of those things. It's just life. Life includes all of it, but there's a way in which, when we know that it's just happening, we're open to what else might just be happening, which is that the infinite, when the infinite touches our mind, there's a sense of wisdom. When it touches the heart, there's a sense of love. When it touches our senses, there's a sense of beauty. And beauty can be any moment, where in the way I would define it is that, the infinite has touched our senses in some way. So in a certain frame of mind, you might say, or a frame of being, you could see a cigarette butt on the sidewalk and feel some beauty there. At other moments, it would not be that experience, but it's possible, and that's kind of what you're pointing us to. That it's possible, no matter what, in your daily life. We don't have to be, in a beautiful environment to see beauty. But I'm glad you have a beautiful environment around you. That's very nice. Okay, let's go to Joel.
Well, it's still morning here, so I'll say good morning.
Good morning. It's morning where I am as well, Joel.
I don't really know what I'm going to say, except I remember when some of the last things you just said reminded me of Jack Kerouac saying, "Seeing God in an orange."
Yeah.
Anyway, hard work is hard work for me, and there are times when I can drop down, so to speak, to my heart center and feel its warmth and openness and vastness even. Other times I'm way in my head and can't find my heart. It's there are many meditations that ask one to breathe through the heart center, and it's very, very. It does most often help me come down from the thinking mind to the feeling body. And I thank you for this meditation, Chris. It's a treasure, and it seems as though returning to this area of wisdom and gentleness and kindness and love is I'm very grateful for this. And if you have any suggestions on
Well,
staying with an open heart.
Yeah, you mentioned gratitude, and that is one of the qualities that comes through the heart, isn't it?
Yes.
And so even when you're thinking, you know, there's a way in which you wouldn't know that you're thinking if you weren't awake to that. Okay? And so what's awake includes, you know, this bigger space. And so like you could possibly imagine that your head is in the heart. Do you know that the thinking mind, I mean, it's an amazing tool. Do you know? I mean, think of all the things that thought has allowed us to know about the universe and science and whatnot. So it's not about making it wrong, but just feeling into that it's being illuminated by this much more mysterious, vast presence that you are. Do you know? I don't know if that's useful at all, but it feels to me as though as soon as we make thinking our enemy, you know, we're pretty far away from the heart, because the heart is not making anything an enemy. So it's like, how do I get rid of thinking? Well, you don't have to get rid of it, but the more that we can see that it's just thinking, just like feeling is just feeling, just like conditioning is just conditioning. You know, it's not something that is valuing or not valuing a self. It's just one of the many, many happenings, you know, just like the birds are singing, you know, and the sun is shining and the clouds are moving and rain comes and so forth. We have weather, we have emotional weather, we have intellectual weather. It's constantly changing. But when you see it in the context of a greater whole, you know, then you can be like Kerouac, you know, seeing the divine in the orange, you know, at least in moments. But you see, we're not going to have a constant experience of anything, because all experiences come and go. What's constant is what I'm hoping to keep pointing to, which is this ever-present, awake, aware mystery. Do you know? That's awake to your thought, awake to your, you know, to your feelings and so forth and so on, you know. And maybe heart work doesn't have to be quite so hard. There can just be this gentle slipping down into, you know, just even consciously, when we just like, okay, I know this energy is just really, can I stop for a moment and just invite it, you know, just for a moment, you know, and then it becomes a little bit more habitual. But as soon as we think we have to perfect something and has to be like this all the time, well, now we're just off to the races again, you know, with the self-improvement projects, which of course require a separate self in order to be improved, if you know what I mean, do you know? So, I mean, and that's one of the things, you know, I want to look at in a little bit, but, you know, just how easily we are returned in our daily lives to some kind of a trance state that just keeps holding on to separation, do you know? And I read something in one of the books that Adyashanti wrote some time ago. He said he had discovered in his spiritual teaching that there's something that people were more afraid of than death, and that it was love, because you could keep the separation going until your last breath, but you can't keep it going with love. And for whatever reason, so many of us are longing for love, but there's also some fear there. Will it be returned? And am I really lovable? And all, you know, all of those things that come up, you know. So it's really any moment that we pay attention to something without separating a self from it. That moment of attention is really a moment of love, I think, you know. I mean, that may be a stretch. I don't know. But anyway, Joel, bless your heart. I would say the heart is already blessed. It doesn't have to be such hard work. It just takes a little willingness, you know, and maybe finding it in the orange. Actually, remember that, I don't know if you remember, but this poem sort of that I read during the meditation about the bowl of vastness that is the heart. Enter the bowl of vastness that is the heart. Listen to the song, it's resonating. Well, I found just recently another little poem about another bowl, and this one's a clay bowl, and this is a new translation of some of Kabir's poems, but I really liked it. It's entitled "This Small Clay Bowl." In this small clay bowl are fields and forests. It is there that the Creator resides. Within this bowl are the 7 oceans and all the stars in the sky. The sacred earth and the environmentalist live there too. In this bowl, the sound of eternity sings, as does the sacred spring. Kabir says, listen to me, my friend. The beloved lives inside of you. And I really like that image of both the vast bowl and the small clay bowl, but both include the universe, and your body includes the universe. I mean, even if you only think of your body as just this, bag of skin, as they say, it still includes the universe, because the breakfast you had this morning required whatever you had or not, but it required sun and rain and somebody taking food from the field to the store or to the distributor. It included the air that you breathe, the blood that's flowing through you is filled with all kinds of different kinds of cells and chemistry of the body and so forth. I don't have the words for it right now, but everything is there, The water is in you. I mean, we're supposedly, 90% water or 75% water in our bodies. I mean, this ocean of awareness is the biggest ocean there is, and that lives in you. And it wakes you up in the morning and it lets you sleep at night, and yet it's still here regardless. So, even when you think about just the body, it includes everything, just like that poem, in the small clay bowl, there are fields and forests. The 7 oceans are there and all the stars. It's just about expanding the sense of your being, like you are being itself. You are life itself. And you're not a victim of life. There may have been difficult challenges that felt like you were being victimized in some way. And I don't want to diminish the pain that can cause. But even that, it was an expression of life. And so as soon as we begin to think of ourselves more like that, then all of these conditioned thoughts and feelings that arise are simply another piece of this changing weather. It doesn't mean not looking at them, but it's really about how we look at them. Are we able to be present to whatever is here from the thing that's already present? And it doesn't require a separate me, to do that. But the me is sort of like a trick candle, in moments it can feel like it's blown out, like you could be sitting, oh yeah, or like Jackie felt this morning, so they go, it was just happening, like the me was, it wasn't there for those moments where life was simply happening. And then, boop, it may come back again. But even that, you see, if we're not judging that that's wrong or not spiritual, we begin to see that whatever this mystery is that has manifested as each of us, it's manifested as the whole of each of us. And so even those things that are challenging, it's not about not looking at them or pretending they don't matter, because everything matters in some respect. But it doesn't matter in the sense that we usually mean, which is a judging mind that's trying to get someplace else. And, for any of you who have lived with perfectionistic tendencies, you kind of know how much suffering that can create, because it's never enough. You're never enough. Life is never enough. What's coming to you is not enough. You know, what you have to give is never enough. You know, and there's this kind of core belief in that's very, very common. You know, I'm not enough. And if you look very closely at that, and some of you who may be dealing with that kind of core belief, look at who you're taking yourself to be when you say, I'm not enough. Because if you're identified with just the sense of a separate somebody, an ego, and I use ego to mean that sense of separation. If you're totally identified with that, then it's not going to be enough. You're right, you aren't enough because it's not who you are. Who you've taken yourself to be is not who you are. You know, now there's a psychological not enough, but I'm talking about the sense of, even if you're wildly successful in life and you have everything that everyone ever thought anybody would need or want for happiness, believe me, I've had those people come to my office in my years of doing psychotherapy, people whose outer life looked, you know, incredibly successful, not happy, because the obstacle, you know, whether it's too much or too little, is not the biggest obstacle to our happiness. It's this sense of being separate. And the more we feel separate, the less we're able to connect to the larger heart, you know, the heart of awareness, the true self. Anyway, I went on there. You know, is there something else that somebody might want to share from earlier, or question even? Okay, you just want to hear me talk some more. Okay, so I'm gonna just say one more thing. Although, Lisa, did you have something? Oh, you're just touching your shoulder. I had hopes. Oh my gosh. What I was going to say is this emphasis, or this looking at love, you know, more than looking at it, being it, even if it's just feels like it's brief. But this being love is what we come back to in order to transform anything, really. But we transform our conditioning more by focusing on what we truly are than all the things we're not. So, in other words, if your focus is more on love than fear, which doesn't diminish the fact that fear is here, we'll have moments of fear, we're human beings, we're tender, we're vulnerable. You know, it's not about saying that's wrong, you shouldn't have it. It might be here, it might be gone for a while. You know, you may have more or less. But rather than focusing on what's wrong, you know, we can look at what's actually already whole, already loving, already open, already accepting of the moment as it is, you know, and to realize that's you, that's an essential you, it's a dimension of you, it's a deep and profound dimension of yourself, you know, and then it's like I was on retreat many years ago with a teacher named Jean Klein, and he was a medical doctor and a musician and also a yoga kind of person. Anyway, well, I'll tell you a funny story. So I went to this retreat, and I actually didn't know him. I'd never heard of him, but I saw a flyer and something said go, and I was like, it was a 2-week retreat. I was like, well, couldn't I wait till I met him someplace closer to home and not know, go, at any rate. So I walk into this big hall, and there are people with their legs behind their necks, like yogis. And I'm thinking, I am in the wrong place for sure. You know, it's just like, oh, good grief, what have I gotten myself into? Well, we didn't all have to do that. But one of the things he suggested, which is why I thought of him in this riff I'm doing right now, is that he would say, find a place in your body that feels completely relaxed. Rather than going to your tension, find a place that feels relaxed. Maybe it's just your earlobe, but some place that feels open and relaxed. And then just let that felt sense begin to permeate. And it's just the opposite from what we're usually doing, which is how do I get rid of the tension? And sometimes bringing attention to the tension, that in itself will begin to relax it, But as soon as we bring in not just attention, but judgment, now we're probably going to be a little bit more constricted about the whole thing. But I also think when we're looking at conditioning and the challenges that come up in our lives and the painful parts, we can actually have more of a tender relationship to those aspects of life or of ourself, and just listen. Let the pain talk to you. Let that piece of conditioning have a conversation with it. What does it want? What's longing to be released from your system, for instance, or at least released from the fact that you identify it with your system. Because we're often just so close-minded, even though we're trying to be open-minded, we're so close-minded because we're just in the loop of our own thinking and judgment. You know what I'm talking about. It just like boom, boom, boom. Sometimes I think about it as like being on a tour bus and all the shades are pulled, so you can't really see the environment out there, and you're just listening to the tour guide. All of the things that you're saying about life, or how it should look, or what it is, or da 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 da. And the shades are, we blind ourselves by believing, and this goes back to what we've been talking about all along, but we blind ourselves by imagining that our thoughts are reality. They are not. They're attempts to describe what we think of as reality. But as you know, we all have a different sense of reality, don't we? For some who deal with never having enough, life will never be enough. For some who deal with identifying with fear, the world will never feel safe. For some who identify with love, the world feels like love. And of course it changes, moment to moment, our experience of life will change. But to begin to see that there are some aspects within us that do have something to teach us, and that story I told about Milarepa, where he said, well, okay, I guess you demons are here, so maybe you have something to teach me. If we looked at our challenging, conditioned moments in that same way, well, maybe you have something to teach me. And the something to teach is not you're a bad person, okay? Let's just get that off the table right away. But the something to teach may be that there's something that just is longing to be known, to be felt, to be experienced directly. And it can be experienced directly in this heart that we share, because it's not judging anything, and it's not threatened by anything. So the more we're in touch with that piece of ourself, the more easily we will find it to be with these difficult places. And I think that, like the most difficult transition to make for a lot of folks is the transition from spiritual insights to the letting go of the sense of a separate self. That's very difficult. And of course, if you have never encountered a moment of that self letting go or being dissolved in the moment, it's harder to believe it could even be true. But all of us have. And I just direct your attention to the many, many moments in your life where you weren't focused on a self. It wasn't all about what's in it for me, how should I do, how am I looking, what am I going to get out of it, why should I do that, there's nothing in it for me. All of these things require, and they keep coming back to a me. Like I say, that trick candle, there'll be moments where it feels like it's not front and center, and we'll be just completely absorbed in something. And of course, being absorbed in something that you love is the best place to be absorbed. And a lot of people have spent a lot of time in their life doing or feeling or trying to be engaged in something that they don't really have any love or passion for. And sometimes it's a necessity. We need it, we need to make money to have food and shelter and so forth. But what is it that you love? To come back to this heart, what is it that you love? And are you engaged with anything or anyone? And it's not always a person, but what is it that you love? Because that's also a way to open the heart. For some people, it could be, food. They love preparing food or eating food, or, we're not talking about addictions here. We're just talking about what you love. For some people, it's physical activity, that I love that. I love to dance, or I love to do yoga or whatever, It's kind of like, what is it for you? Not what should it be? And as soon as we stop comparing ourselves with anyone else, we're more able to discern really what it is that we love, and whether or not we're honoring that. For some, it might be gardening, or it might be, being with friends, or it might be all kinds of things, or for some is reading. You're so absorbed in reading and you love it. You love it, and for other folks, no. So there are so many moments in our daily life that we're not thinking about who is doing something, but it comes just like that after the fact. Just like that after the fact. Oh, I did it. Oh, even people who have had deep awakenings, well, I woke up 5 years ago, and now they've been trying to, do something with that from memory all this time. Are you awake to this moment? See, that's what truly being awake is. Are you awake to this moment? Whether that's a conditioned moment, whether that's a heart-opened moment, whether that's a sleepy moment, And it isn't about, oh, I've got to focus every moment, I can split my mind up into, it just flows, right? It just flows. It's like a river. Our life is like a river. I think it was Nisargadatta who said something like, my life is like a river between the banks of pain and pleasure. And there's only difficulty, if I get off on one bank or the other and think that's it, So it will touch both pain and pleasure, but it just flows. Life just flows, And you've had probably 1,000 thoughts already today, or more. You've had 1,000 different sensations, maybe, And as this awakeness is operating more and more consciously in the body-mind, our attention gets more and more subtle. Maybe you've had some big openings and you think, oh, that's it, and how can I have the big opening again? But in fact, as we go along, the big things, kind of get more and more subtle. And so we're more and more open to both joy and suffering. And for some folks, that's difficult because, they feel like they're taking on the woes of the world because they're open to the suffering. And here's where, we need to find ways to allow energy to move through. And for some people, there's some physical, qigong or or yoga or some kinds of activity that sort of feel like they allow energies to move through, can be useful if you feel overwhelmed by taking in too much suffering from the world. A lot of times it just points us to our own suffering, and so we think we're taking in the suffering of the world, but actually we're dealing with our own suffering. So then what wants to be seen here? What wants to be brought back into the wholeness of you? And so forth. The other thing that you can play with, and some people are more attuned to energy than others, so you don't have to be, but if any of you have had experience of the different chakras in the body, the heart, the throat, the mind, the base of the spine, those kind of energy centers, you may have a felt sense of how energy isn't just coming in, it's also going out. So there's a flow both front and back in terms of the bodily sensation. And so you can begin to actually feel like that there's an opportunity there to release energy from the back. It'll come in from the front, often. I mean, it's not that energy itself has a direction always, but we'll feel it in the body coming in this way. And can we begin to feel like it just wants to be what it is, and then it flows through. I don't even know if that makes any sense to any of you, but in case a few of you have that experience, certainly working as a psychotherapist, where every single person who comes in, at least initially is in pain of some sort, you do acquire that ability to let it flow, to feel it, to be present with it, to have compassion and love for the suffering that's in your energy field, and then to let it go, to let it flow, to let it be what it is when it's here. And it's the same with our conditioning. We don't have to be therapists. To be with our conditioning is like that as well. You let it be what it is. You're not trying to pretend that what you feel is not what you feel. And yet, how is it that you receive it? And where do you receive it? With a judging mind? Most people do that. But as you know, it just keeps that sense of suffering going. Let me stop again and before we have a break, and just see if there's anything that came up that you guys want to talk about or comment on.
Hi, Dorothy.
Kama, hi.
Hi. I can't seem to connect to the vastness of awareness or love. And I thought if I say it out loud, maybe it'll make for a different experience for the rest of the time we have together. So I'm not even sure what I'm expecting by saying this, but I thought.
Let me give you a little exercise right now, right here and now. Look around the room where you're sitting.
Okay.
Does it feel like that's all happening outside of you, or is it happening inside your awareness?
I want to say both.
Okay. So you're here and the walls are here and so forth and so on, but even the you're here is happening in awareness, isn't it? The walls could not be known if you weren't aware of them. Yeah?
Yeah.
And even, no matter who you take yourself to be, that's also happening in awareness.
Yes.
This is what we're talking about. It's all happening inside this mystery that we're going to call awareness. See, we think that we're a person with presence, perhaps, but there's also a presence that's creating the image of person, if that makes any sense at all. And see, it's not, we don't have to have a really big experience. I mean, just a simple experience like you just did, you know, like if you really kind of begin to get it, that this flower or this tree or this picture or this computer or these images on the computer, they're happening inside you. Even if we're just looking at sensory perception, you know, we don't have to go to the big, the big thing, you know, just inside still, you know, your own sensory perception is what's being interpreted by your brain. But the senses couldn't be known without this, it's awake.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I'm talking about, beginning to feel into what's ever present, no matter the experience. And we're sort of like an automatic camera, you know, the focus can be wide angle. You can look out, you know, you can be on a high place and look out and you can see, it feels like forever. You know, if you're on a mountain, you can see the trees in the mountain and the valley and the villages below and all of that. You know, it can have a really wide angle, you know, awareness in terms of how it operates in the body-mind organism. Or it can be very, very focused, like a camera lens, you know, really close up. Now you're just looking at one specific thing. And that also can actually transform your relationship or your experience of that one specific thing. Just to focus all of your attention anywhere, you know. And hopefully, you know, with an open heart. come back to our heart exercises. Yeah, so when you say I don't feel it this way, feel it the way you feel it. See, I mean, this is what I was talking about. We don't have to compare ourselves or our experiences with anyone else.
I think I don't want to feel it the way I feel it.
Oh, is that the case? And how come?
I'm positing that because sort of that came up when you said that statement. I thought, oh, then I don't want to feel it this way. It is so painful. So I thought when we were going through that meditation and the vastness of awareness and love, the vast bowl, I was like, I really want to touch that because I would like some peace.
Yes. Well, what I can say is that your longing for that this is in you, longing to be known. It's not someplace else. So one of the things that you can do when you feel that, I really want this, I really am longing to have an experience that I've heard about or other people talk about and I haven't had it, or I haven't had it yet, or I haven't had it consciously, that longing is the very thing that's calling. And so sometimes we can follow our longing to its source. Okay, I feel this longing. Where is it coming from? Is it actually coming from out there? No, I doubt it. You know, it may seem like it because, okay, this person feels like they had that experience and da-da-da, you know, but all of that still is your judging mind. But the longing itself, you know, where does it come from? I don't have Rumi's poetry with me where I'm sitting, but you know, there are so many poems that Rumi talks about in terms of, you know, that being the divine calling us from inside. You know, this longing is the thing that you're looking for. Yeah.
Thank you, Dorothy.
Yeah. Okay, I think we could take a break now and we'll come back. Well, maybe we'll do like we did yesterday, 15, it'll be at 15, here's my clock here. Okay, it's 25 after the hour. Let's come back in 15 minutes at 20 till the hour. And we're going to talk a little bit more about living our realizations, whatever they are. However big or small they seem to be, we all have some realizations. And so what is it like to live from those? Okay, I'll see you at 20 till the hour. Have a good little stretch, break, whatever. And you could also listen to music that I think Sarah's going to play for us. Okay, one by one, we're coming back into view. A couple more people could let us see their gorgeous faces. Well, one of the things that I wanted to just add a couple things in terms of what we were exploring around love and loving kindness and letting our conditioned responses that are challenging somehow be held in the heart of love. And what brings this to mind is the picture that Rachel has of her hands over her heart. You know, we're not seeing her face, but we're seeing that photo. And this is something that you can physically do at any point, you know, where there's a difficult moment that's come up. It's just a physical reminder that there's a heart here, and that also it reminds us that we're human, that we're tender-hearted some places, we're vulnerable in some places. We're part of this breed called human beings that have all kinds of differences and also foibles and also frustrating moments. And it's just a way, whether we do it really with our hands over our heart or whether we just consider the possibility that we don't have to be the perfect somebody or other that we thought we wanted to be or that we thought we were headed toward, because there's a huge tendency for spiritual seekers to take on a subtler identity, a spiritual self. Any of you have that sense? You know, trying to be a spiritual self. Okay, so how does that manifest? Well, it manifests in all kinds of ways, but it just becomes a new reference point for this sense of separation. And also it can create a sense of suffering because we're always judging a self, a separate self idea. We're always judging that in relationship to what our spiritual ideals are. And so, you know, it's always about, you know, striving. It's always about trying to get someplace else. It's always about trying to be better, to be improved, to be, you know, and all the energies that we spend on trying to be someplace else are energies that aren't actually available to the same extent with being here now. And being here now is really what our aware being is. It's here now, be here now. Was that title of Ram Dass's first book, I think, way back when. You know, so a lot of us have experiences, or we're lacking the experience that we want, and so we're not going to be here now. But be here now is the only place or time that we're actually able to be awake. The rest of it is either memory or a projection. And it's been said that if there's too much past and not enough presence, then we're going to be caught in bitterness and regret and blame and all of those things. If there's too much future and not enough presence, then we're going to be caught in tension and anxiety and fear about the future. And of course, these things are connected because mostly we're projecting into the future what our experience has been in the past. And so we're on this continuum of time that says, well, this happened then, so it's probably going to happen now, or oh my gosh, what if it happens again? So, the mind operates in time, and it operates in duality. It doesn't mean that the mind is an enemy or it's wrong. It's just that that's where it operates, And then there's something that's operating beyond the mind. Whether we know it or not, whether we feel it or not, it's still here. It's moving you, it's moving me, it's moving life. It's as the Buddhist phrase goes, spring comes and the grass grows by itself. It's like all the movements of life ultimately spring from the same ground. It's like a field of incredibly different wildflowers, each of them having their own unique color and shape and fragrance and so forth, but they all come from the same ground. And so when you begin to touch into, even if at first it feels intellectual, you touch into the possibility that everything is coming from the same ground. You don't know what that is, maybe you don't have any sense of that, but here it is. Something's coming, arising right out of whatever causes and conditions, yes, but being itself, where does that arise from? At any rate, I just wanted to mention this sense of spiritual self because it's such a temptation to, well, I had this experience 5 years ago, and now that's who I am. Now I'm the spiritual self. But one of the hardest things to do or to experience for most of us in terms of transitioning from our insights to living more and more from whatever it is we've realized, is the holding on to separation in so many ways, and yet also, we can't make being human our enemy. If we do, we're just creating more suffering for ourselves and for the world. So it's really seeing, where does that come from? Where does this thing called human come from? Where does this thing called my consciousness come from? And for me, the image that comes to mind anyway, is a little bit like electricity is always operating if we're in an electric grid, but the lamp and the television and the computer and all those things, they plug into what's the common electric current that's here in your home. So it's not an exact analogy, but for me anyway, I think of awareness, awareness that's everywhere. We might say ever present, no matter where, who, what species we're talking about, as it moves in the body mind, it moves as consciousness. Some people will use those words interchangeably, and they are, in some sense, interchangeable. But when you talk about changing your consciousness, or consciousness rising, or consciousness, or being unconscious, or whatever. So, we use that word when we're talking about the body mind interchangeably with awareness, but actually, this mystery that's all things, that's the wholeness of being, has manifested as you, has manifested as consciousness in you, has manifested, as the flower, or the tree, or the sky, or the moment of terror or the moment of joy or whatever. It's just constantly out of itself manifesting the moment, the conditioned moment as well. And so when we begin to really just come back to the moment, come back to, and if it's a conditioned moment, then that's what you're with. But hopefully you're with it with more consciousness, and a willingness to be present, to see what it wants. What does this really want? What purpose does it serve? Is another way we can deal with our conditioning. And a lot of conditioning, the purpose it seems to serve is it just keeps a separate self front and center. My problems, my issues, my life, my, me, mine. But who is that me? See? Is there something that's manifesting even as that, even as the me, even as this vulnerable human thing, even as the strength of, both, we have both strength and resilience, and also vulnerability and, unknown. There's so much unknown about life and who we are and so forth and so on. So, my point is that there's no separation between what we are and what's manifesting. And the more that we know that, it doesn't mean everything's equally coming from a pure source, so to speak, of love and presence and whatnot. You and I know the difference when we see it. But on the other hand, it's not separate either. Whatever's arising isn't separate. And so when you realize that, it gives you a whole different relationship. It transforms your relationship to what's arising. It's sort of like when it rains, you're not in control of the rain, and you either enjoy it or you don't enjoy it. Or when it, if you live in an area where you have thunder. San Francisco, we almost never have thunder and lightning. So that's a long ago memory for me growing up in the Midwest of the United States. But, it's like you're not in control of that, but you accept that it is as it is, right? And then when it comes to the storms that arise in your own experience, in the inner storms, you can accept that that's what's here. But in that case, if we're not trying to control them and get rid of them, we can actually investigate, as we've been doing, experientially what's here, what is it wanting from us, what is it longing for, how does it want to move? Is there anything that I can put my attention on that can begin to be like that sun of awareness that begins to melt, and so forth and so on. And I just want to say a moment, when we talk about love, that sometimes an act of love is saying no. When we talk about, well, you just have to accept everything as it is, the no can be also part of what you accept as it is. And sometimes that's an expression of love. A lot of times it isn't. It's a resistance or refusal that comes from a tense place. But then there are these places where, and I know it's just obvious. If someone is abusing you, for instance, and you say no, that's coming from a loving place, a love for yourself, and also love for the apparent other who doesn't need to be allowed to be abusive if there's some opportunity to say no in a way that's safe for you. So it isn't about, oh, I just have to accept everything and blah blah blah. It's accepting what's arising in yourself first and foremost, but accepting it from a different place, from a wiser and more loving, more compassionate place in yourself. So when people have had some degree of awakening, then there's this thing we call embodiment, which is much more challenging sometimes than the awakening piece, which just can happen. But this piece of how do I live it, whatever our realization is, how do I live it, becomes more challenging. But it also is more challenging when we think that there's a separate somebody that has to figure it all out. So once again, if we're in that process of living it, where are we living from is much more a question than how do I do it? Because the mind is always trying to figure out how. Those are all, the how questions are always mind questions. And most of those mind questions have to do with control. How do I control this, that, or the other thing? But you see, once we even begin to have an inkling that something more mysterious is actually operating here, that it's keeping you in your orbit and the planets in their orbit, once we have a sense of that, then maybe we can begin to trust that there's a wisdom beyond our mind's thinking, that there's a spontaneous way of responding instead of reacting. And all of that kind of just requires us to be open to it, in the sense of, you know, maybe I don't have to figure this all out. Maybe I don't have to know. Maybe I can live. I think it was Jackie who spoke the other day about speaking from unknowing or living from unknowing. Do you know that the mind thinks that enlightenment is going to be the ultimate state of knowing, but actually, as Adyashanti once said, no, it's the ultimate state of being, and the price is knowing. The price is knowing. So as soon as we get back into that mentality that I have to figure it out, and I am this separate somebody, and I have to do it with my mental capacity. Dude, I'm not saying mind is not a part of this, but now we're back to the separate somebody idea. And this thing called embodiment, it's just not a self-improvement project. It becomes less and less about that, you know, and there's a time and place for that, you know, but the self-improvement project is always for the me. It's for the me thought, isn't it? It's not, you know, you might say, okay, well, if I improve this, I'll be better able to help the world. And, you know, we can go there, and that might be true. But what if you had the same energy looking to discover, who is that me? Who are you? Who am I really? Because that, touching into that and having that question be uppermost, at least at times, is going to be much more transforming, ultimately speaking, than all the energy you put into improving a self. So embodiment is really not a process of adding more. It's a process of subtracting more, you know? It's not like there's a flag that one places on the top of Enlightenment Mountain and says, I've arrived. That's what the mind imagines. But actually, it's a shedding of so much, a shedding of these ideas that we have, that we're just these conditioned, separate somebodies, do you know? So life moves spontaneously. Sometimes it feels like it moves ruthlessly. It's true. But do we stay present to the moment or not? Do you know? Do we stay present to a moment of contraction or a moment of fear, or a moment of conditioned response? You can say, well, it's just conditioning, you know, so in the wholeness of being, it doesn't really matter. And that's true on one level, but it also doesn't deepen how we're living our realization, because that requires attention. You know, it requires attention and alignment, you know, are you aligned with what you deeply know? And I'm not talking like intellectual knowing. And then you begin to understand or realize bit by bit that the freedom doesn't really depend on control, on manipulation, on inauthenticity. It just doesn't depend on that. But when we're clearly seeing from the mystery, from the heart that we were exploring earlier, when we're seeing clearly from there, then all kinds of things may arise to do or say or not do or not say spontaneously. And of course, it's hard if you think that you need to be in control of everything. It's hard to let go, but it's just like bit by bit, life shows us we're not in control of a lot of things that we're not in control of. And even if we think that we are, where do the thoughts come from? See, if we're moved to think, okay, I really need to change this, where did that arise from? From somebody separate, or from someplace that you don't even know? How did it come to be that this building was built by someone's idea? Does that mean thinking created it, or did something create the thinking? If you get the drift. So when we say, being more and more awake, if we want to use that word, it doesn't lie in knowing, it lies in unknowing. It lies in getting more and more comfortable with not knowing and trusting your own wisdom, trusting your own inner knowing, trusting your own love, trusting your heart, not the emotional heart. I mean, if you trust the emotional heart and have no wisdom, you can get in trouble. If you have wisdom and no heart, you can get in trouble, right? This is like being in touch with that deeper space, your home ground. And what is it like to live more and more from that place, and to begin to see, as we will, more and more clearly, all the different places where we're holding on to separation. And if you're interested in truth, if you're really curious about what's true, you don't go to those places with judgment. You're aware that, okay, this is a place where separation resides. Can I look into the matter without judging it? Can I understand it? What is its message? What's it maybe wanting? What is it longing? What is that feeling longing for? And so forth. So we stay with the mystery of being, and that's not about a how-to. And as this moves, we become. It seems strange, but we become less and less interested in the whole project of the me, and much more interested in how life is actually moving, moment to moment. How incredibly fascinating and interesting being itself is, because it's being everything. And when you just stop and sit back into your being, when you're not trying to be this or that, there's a relaxation that happens, of freedom that happens from that space of simply being. And life doesn't stop. The next thing keeps happening. The mind thinks, well, I'll just become I'll become this passive person that has no strength and no direction, and it's really not that at all. But you're directed, we might say, from that deeper place, and you're conscious of being directed from that deeper place, and you're willing to be directed from that deeper place, and you don't know how it's going to be, because truth doesn't give us a 10-year plan. It doesn't give us sometimes even a 10-minute plan. And the mind would like to have a 10-year plan. Okay, everything's going to be okay, or this is what you're going to deal with in 5 years or whatever. And I'm not saying planning is wrong. If you have no food, you need to go to the grocery store. If you're going to have dinner that night, you plan. But it's that truth itself, it doesn't give you a plan. It may very well show its direction. It's like the current in an ocean, where you realize the waves or whatever they are, they're, tossing about, they're stormy, they're calm, whatever. But then underneath the waves, there's a current. So sometimes we feel into that current, what's the direction that life seems to be moving? And it can change, as we all know. Sometimes we think we're going here, and then some surprising thing happens, and we, okay, I guess it's going here. But rather than I have to decide, there's a way of being open to how this deeper dimension of yourself seems to want to operate. And, we can follow it, or sometimes we don't follow it. And then you find out, what's the result of that? And once again, you're just looking clearly. You're not looking with judgment. And I think that's the biggest piece. And how this love moves itself, how it shows itself in the world. It's so varied and so different. But I give you a couple of examples. And they're both similar in one way, but very different examples. And one is a story that's told about Ramana Maharshi, who was a guru in the last century in India. And this woman came to him who had lost everything. She lost her husband, her sons, her house. Actually, I was reading just this morning in the paper that there was a woman who was interviewed after this Morocco earthquake. She'd lost her husband, all of her children, and her home. So this was a woman in India who, not from an earthquake, but I'm not sure how she had lost all of those loved ones and the things that she felt were secure. And she was just bereft, as you can imagine, and she was just weeping. And she went to different people, and nobody could help her. And so finally, somebody said, "Well, there's Ramana Maharshi is like a saint, and if you went to him, maybe he could help you with all of this loss." So she goes to the ashram, and she is in his presence, and she sits there, and she tells her story, and she's crying, and he says nothing. And she can't believe it. Here she's come all this way. Here's this person who's supposed to be such a loving presence, and he's not saying anything to her. And she cries some more, and she feels more frustrated and so forth. But pretty soon it stops. And she just looks in his eyes, and those eyes are just looking in hers. And something calms down. And something begins to feel peace and love. And it's quiet. It's all happening in silence. And she eventually becomes a devotee, and I think maybe even lives at the ashram after that for a while, or comes back and helps out. But it doesn't always require a doing of something, but rather a being of something. And so even though there were no words, something came through in that silence that was so healing and so transforming, to her. Well, we don't always have to go to a guru for that, because my next story is about a little boy, a 4-year-old boy, who's walking by the house of a neighbor. And the neighbor is an elderly gentleman who's lost his wife recently. And he's looking sad about it. And the little boy just goes up to the old man and sits on his lap. That's all he does. He just sits on his lap. So when the little guy went home, his mom said, "Well, what did you say to Mr. So-and-so, And he said, "Oh, I didn't say anything. I just sat on his lap and helped him cry." And it's just such a sweet little story, about how the simplest things, the simplest moments of real presence can bring forth what's needed. And of course, sometimes there are words, and sometimes words are helpful. But if you have experienced a loss, someone has died that you were close to, or that you loved, or your partner, a lot of people don't know what to say. and they're uncomfortable, and they don't know what would help. And really, it depends on the person, I guess. But I mean, calling on my own experience, people would say, well, what can I do to help? I wouldn't want to be figuring out what somebody else should do. But what did help was just a simple presence, just being here with somebody who's grieving, or being here with somebody who's upset. Let me just sit with you, you know? And then sometimes people would just leave a little gift at the door, not expect a thank you. Just kind of knowing that this was a time that you weren't going to be involved in trying to direct the traffic, so to speak. Other people, it might be very different, you know, for them, but it's sort of like being willing to tune in to your own deep knowing and trusting it. And that's the big one, isn't it? Trusting it. You know, it's not scrambling around, you know, what should I do? What should I do? How can I show, or whatever. And I'm not just talking about grief here, but you've been with people who are enraged about something. And if you're still safe in their presence, do you know, there's a way of being present to the moment, whether it's your own moment or what it appears to be someone else's moment. It still is the energy field that you're in. You know, what does presence, your presence, what is it showing you or telling you to do or not do? And so many times we're doing more than we need to. But the presence alone is an incredible gift. It's just an incredible gift to ourselves in terms of dealing with conditioning, and dealing with anything that might come up. And part of, and this is sometimes hard for this quote, quote, spiritual self I was talking about, to really befriend our humanity, to really befriend and feel humble about just being an ordinary somebody. You know, you think you're going to be special if you have had these experiences or whatever, and then you find out, no, you're not special. But something really profound has revealed itself, but it doesn't make you special. It just makes you more willing to be part of this humanity with all of its foibles and its vulnerabilities and its strengths and its resilience, all those good things. So what I'm pointing to here is that the irony is that we think we're going to just have this knowing of everything, but actually it's living in unknowing that allows the knowing or the wisdom or the love to come forth. You know, it's not having to know, not having to grab hold and try to control. It's letting go of this idea of separation, this idea of a separate self. That self, however you want to define self, it contains wisdom and love. And so are we listening to that dimension of ourself or not? Or are we just thinking we have to figure it all out intellectually? And I think the question we can also ask ourselves, and this is an important question, the whole so-called spiritual search. Do I want freedom more than I want life to look a certain way? Do I want truth more than I want to look a certain way? And as soon as we determine in ourselves that our commitment is to truth, it will lead the way. But before then a lot of it is trying to look a certain way. And, you know, someone talked about that yesterday, you know, like growing up, feeling like we needed to look a certain way in order to be loved or accepted, you know, at home. And in that respect, you know, in terms of how we're all raised, this is a little bit simplistic, but it feels like, you know, there's either the tendency to want to please in order to get approval that we then think of as love, you know, and then that sometimes in some families means giving up something more authentic about yourself. So that's one way it can go. The other way it can go and does is people rebel. No, I'm going to be my own person and I'm not going to do what you want and I'm going to stand firm in myself and da 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 da. But for those folks, there's often a sense of having to let go of belonging. So, there's a wanting approval so much that I'll abandon what's true for me, or there's I want what's true for me so much that I abandon, the love or the sense of belonging. And those are both difficult things, and they're not even conscious choices, but there is some way in which we come back as this process, once we're engaged in this process, we come back to standing in our own two shoes, so to speak. We come back to taking a seat in ourselves. And when we were experiencing this morning, and maybe we'll just take a minute and have a little meditation about this, but like what does it actually feel like to take a seat in yourself? So let's just do that for a minute. Just close your eyes and just imagine that you're going to consciously, in this moment, feel into what does it feel like to take a seat in yourself. Kind of however you define self doesn't matter so much as what does it feel like to be aligned there. And you're actually taking a seat, not in what other people think, not in what you think you should think or feel, not in any of those shoulds. But what happens when you actually take a seat in your home ground, however you feel into that? And as you begin to feel into, possibly, hopefully, some of you, taking a seat in yourself, in the truth of yourself, in the deeper dimension of yourself, how does that feel in the body? For some people, there's an uprightness that seems to occur quite naturally as soon as we take a seat in ourselves or a stance in ourselves. And it's not a stance against anything, it's a standing in the truth of you. And there's a willingness there to befriend yourself, despite the imperfections that we know we all have if we're trying to balance our humanity against some fantasy of being a perfected person. It includes all of it. But there's a befriending that can happen when you're standing in your own essence, your own being. And perhaps you can feel into what it feels like, or what it could feel like when you stop thinking that you have to be this or that. And you're just standing or sitting in your own beingness. So the felt sense of this is so much more important than the thought about it. What's this felt sense of being aligned body, mind, spirit. Even for a moment, you can feel into that vertical alignment. And what we call time is just flowing through that. Because when we're deeply present to the truth of what we are, we're actually standing in the timeless, in a moment of time. So you can begin to feel both dimensions. Timeless mystery. And whatever this moment in time is manifesting or revealing or thinking or feeling. Can you feel in yourself where those dimensions meet? Time and the timeless, the vertical and the horizontal movements of life. And it's always now. That meeting place is always now. Now. And there you are. Here, now. No matter where you go, how far you travel, you will always have an experience of being here. Because here doesn't relate to a place when you're standing in yourself. It relates to being here, present, in yourself, wherever you are. Always here. Here, now, for whatever's arising, whatever conditioned moment is arising, whatever moment of beauty or truth or love is arising, whatever moment feels challenging is arising. It's all here, and you're here for it. And that's meditation, being here for what's here. Okay. And then I'll just say one more thing, and then I want to hear from you all. And that is that there's no finish line. We have this fantasy, when all of this happens, there will be an end, there'll be a finish line, and I will have arrived, and I'll know that I have arrived. But I love, this is a Zen quote, that goes, finished, finished, finished. When it's finally finished, there is no place to finish. Because in the infinite you are, where would there be a finish? Do you know? And so there's no end to the exploration that we all can do or be of the infinite, of the vast mysteries of life itself, of our own life, of our own experience of living, of being. Next month I'm doing a day-long called The Wonder of Being, and it just feels to me like, even though we don't think about certain moments of being wonderful, they're always full of wonder. The good ones and the bad ones. Because being is being it. Being is being this moment. you know, and you are not separate from that being. So when we talk about, or I talk about living in unknowing, you also begin to see that the mind would rather create a story, even if it's not a particularly pleasant story about oneself or life or whatever, would rather create a story or a narrative than to actually live in unknowing. You know, it's much more comfortable. Okay, I know I'm this kind of person, so at least I know who I am. Well, do you really? And that's where we come back to that all-important question of what am I? Who am I really? And I encourage any of you interested to let that question drop into that bowl of vastness we were speaking about, or to drop into the heart, or to drop into this empty space, you know, and then see if you can find who or what that is. Because like in our very first meditation, in our tasting event, when we were doing the meditation without memory, some of you have had the experience, or maybe did in that one, of, you know, there's something here even when all of these ways that I've defined myself aren't currently the way I'm defining myself, you know, and there's still something here, and that still something here has been present to you since day one. Okay, let's hear from each other in our remaining time, and this is your opportunity to ask or comment, even if you've been quiet before. And it's so nice to see Rachel's face, because I was using her hand picture as one of the things. I worked with a woman once who was having a lot of difficult, challenging times, and she just took to this, you know, as a reminder, and it was incredibly helpful dealing with some challenging conditioning. Okay, so what's here for any of you, or what questions might have arisen in this weekend? Lee.
Thanks, Dorothy. I don't have anything to comment or ask about today's session, but I wanted to comment about something that happened yesterday evening after our session. I was watching television with my wife, and it was a particularly poignant scene. And, you know, when you're watching a good show or movie, it seems like you identify with the characters. You can feel their emotions and feelings. And then it went to a commercial, and I suddenly had this intense feeling of anxiety, as if I had gone from identifying with the person on the TV to not returning to my own. I didn't know what my identity was, and somehow it induced intense anxiety, so much that I actually walked out of the room. And then I remembered what you said about being present with the feeling, whether it's fear or what have you. And so I was able to do that. And after a little while, I realized not only is there no reason to have fear or anxiety because we're sitting there on the couch, there's nothing to be afraid of, but it wasn't even my own thought or feeling. It was the mind, the thoughts having a mind of their own, so to speak. And it was almost funny. And then it went from having this intense sense of anxiety to just a physical sensation in the chest, and the thought that, or the story that accompanied it, went away. And then after a few minutes, the feeling in the chest went away as well.
Well, it's a great example of what being present to an uncomfortable feeling, where it can lead, right? You know, because we can try to talk ourselves out of it, but until we actually face into the felt sense of anxiety in your chest or wherever you feel it, you know, we haven't really been present to it. We're just thinking about it. And that combination, you know, can create insight or relief, or transform a moment quickly, do you know? it's amazing how quickly things can transform when we're not trying to get rid of them.
But just the feeling when it came on was so intense, it felt like it was gripping me.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's what we were talking about earlier, like, I mean, now in that TV show, you were identified with a character, and then you were letting yourself feel that identification with someone else, quote unquote. Of course, that was an expression of you as well, but in terms of the felt sense, it was like, and then suddenly there's this commercial and you don't know who you are at that point. You don't have anybody to pattern your feelings or thoughts with. So when, in terms of what you were speaking about earlier, trying to be what other people want you to be, that it feels like that left you in a place of not knowing, okay, who's here now? Before I was very much this character, and now who am I? But of course, we're changing characters all the time within our own experience, because we play these different roles. You were there with your wife, so you have the role of a husband, you have the role of a worker, you have the role of a student, or an athlete, or a musician, or whatever. But it's not just one steady thing. And so you realize that you in your daily life are kind of continually changing clothes, so to speak, coming from different masks. The you, quote unquote, that you present at work might feel a little different than the one you present at home, or with your best friend, or with your children, or whatever, depending on the role that life is giving you to play in that moment. And so a lot of people are very identified with a role that they play, not knowing that it's a role, and then trying to discover, well, who am I if I'm not that? And that's the question, that's our question, the question, who or what am I? So I'm glad you could have that experience of being present to anxiety, because it does have the capacity to transform things. And it may or may not go away, but your relationship to it softens. It softens as soon as we're allowing ourselves to be present.
I've had a somewhat similar experience a few times, being out to dinner, where all of a sudden it feels like I'm watching a movie, and this lead character is in the movie and I'm sort of behind it. And again, it's disconcerting. I don't know who I am or who I'm supposed to be. It always seems once I start engaging in conversation, everything is fine. But it's just a moment of mental anxiety.
Well, because you think you should know who you are. What if you're a mystery?
Well, that's what I'm discovering.
There you go. I mean, the deepest dimension of ourself, we're not going to know intellectually. And so when you start to feel into that, you don't know who this is, but you know that it is. Do you know? It's like, I don't know who I am, but I know that I am. It's like that begins to shift. And then, things kind of fall away. And the mind is not comfortable with that. And so it reasserts its role or its sense of self or whatever, which is just happening automatically too, right? It's not some problem that we have to fix. But it is a little bit weird when you begin to come out from behind some of those identifications and those identifications with roles, and you come out from behind there and you can't really find a separate somebody. And then, we'll have fear or anxiety if we do. But also, you just begin to see how, how somebody like Shakespeare could say, all the world's a stage and all the poor players, what fret and strut across the stage. You realize that there are ways that people have seen into what seems like a dream in terms of how some people will describe it, or it seems like an illusion, But then I go back to, you know, the world is illusion, Brahman alone is real, the world is Brahman. So then you realize these come together. Whatever the moments of Li are also the moments of the mystery being here as that exact experience. Anything else?
No, that does it for me. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thanks for your contributions. Margaret.
I just felt yesterday and today, I've gone through so many different emotions and thoughts and experiences. Like yesterday, for the rest of the day, I had such ease of being and sense of fulfillment and completeness. Today, it's been much more sort of tumultuous and emotional. But when I do a daily practice, which I've done recently, Zazen, and no matter, I'm really focusing on not trying to have it be a certain way or a good meditation or a bad meditation, but I still don't experience the range that I've experienced during this workshop. So I just want to comment on that and have any suggestions.
Well, when we're quiet, or we get more quiet, whether it's in meditation or just spending some time like you have this weekend, you know, kind of immersed in these sorts of teachings. But in the quiet, whatever wants to come forth has a space to do that. So the idea that I could feel so present and so whatever yesterday, and then today, whoosh, you know, there's this tumult arising. It's not unusual that in this space of silence, there's now enough, I would say, enough truth operating in the system that certain things can come up, that they can present themselves, because there's nobody, you know, in those moments where we're just kind of open in the silently awake, you know, not that we're not talking or whatever, but, you know, so then things come up and then they're just coming up to, one, be what they are, two, to be seen, hopefully, from this deeper place where you can feel compassion for tumult. You know, it's not comfortable at times, right? But it also feels like it goes together. And this is why, you know, at least, you know, before I retired from my psychotherapy practice, many sessions would just be periods of silence, you know, and this would be with people who were comfortable with that. They weren't thinking that was a punishment or something. Some people will feel silence as that, but you know, there would just be these falling into silence, because it then allows whatever is here to actually arise, you know, because we're not trying to manipulate what's going to happen, and so forth. So that's kind of how it feels as you describe it.
Yeah, I suppose I'm just wondering why a lot of this more doesn't come up when I'm sitting silently. I didn't have any problem with the tumult today.
Oh, okay.
It was, you know, it felt good because I became aware, you know, I just became more aware of things, and I could, you know, experience that sort of the awareness, embracing that very familiar emotion. But in my normal day-to-day practice, it feels like it's, you know, I don't have a lot of tumult or a lot of, just it's a lot more peaceful. And I don't know if that's not
Well, we can become, and I don't know whether you feel yourself to be or whatever, but one can become a very good meditator, and that still doesn't equal freedom. Do you know? And I think for some experiences that want to come up or want to be seen or brought back into the wholeness of being, be loved more, it requires for some people, or at least it's helped for some people, to be in a relationship, you know, to have other people around to witness or to support or to have a sense of safe, of being safer. And I don't know that you experienced that this weekend, but I know that there are a lot of issues that we might have that were relational, you know, and those don't necessarily heal as in the same way when we're just trying to deal with them by ourselves.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
But also, I mean, every silent sitting is going to be different, do you know, in the sense, and particularly if we're used to being able to kind of drop into a peaceful place, you know, where, you know, there isn't a lot of stuff coming up or coming through or whatever. Like, that's what I'm saying. We can become good meditators, but if that's what we're going for. But then when you get up off your cushion or out of your chair, do you know, are you free? And so part of meditation is just doing what we're doing here, is being with what's here. And then they're all going to be different. But I do think that being in a group or where other people are talking about common themes, do you know, it helps open things up.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Yes, Catherine.
Well, I missed most of yesterday and I haven't had a chance to watch the recording yet. But well, for me, meditation has always been something that is so challenging and practically impossible frequently because I can't quiet my mind. And and I just want to interject that. But the main thing is I was sitting here and feeling like what you were giving us was so rich, with so many possibilities and so many doors that can be opened. And I was just overwhelmed with like wanting to do everything at the same time. But then in the meditation, suddenly, instead of choosing or trying to choose or whatever, my mind just quieted and wasn't asking where to go, and wasn't going anywhere else, but just sitting in silence, where if there was something that was ready to pop up, it could, but mainly I was just sitting in silence, feeling like, oh, this is really helpful.
Silence, sitting in silence can be very helpful. But here, I'll just give us a hint here. When we think of sitting in silence or sitting in awareness, there's a separate somebody doing that. But when you sit as silence or you sit as awareness, there's a very different felt sense. And so when you're sitting as awareness, it doesn't really matter if you're having a lot of thoughts, because it's just happening, you know.
Yeah.
It's just happening. And when you say you can't quiet your mind, people who start meditation practice at any point, you know, they'll sit for a few times or a few days or whatever, and say, well, I'm not good at it because all I'm doing when I'm sitting there is thinking. That's the very first thing we discover when we start a meditation practice, is just how busy our mind is and how we have been conditioned to put so much attention on that, you know. But then, you know, then there are these moments that where we discover and have the experience that you're describing today, you know, of just being the silence. And yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I've done several 1-month retreats, and this was at the Forest Refuge, and so it was self-directed, and at this time, I was so intent on forcing my mind to be silenced And then I sat for 2 hours, and it just got more and more full of thought. And
It was rebelling against that, huh? Yeah. Well, you've probably heard the story. I mean, it's like if you have a wild horse and you try to put it in a very small, area, it will go a little bit crazy. But if you give it a very, very big meadow to run in, then it begins to return more and more to its natural way of being. And it's the same with our mind. If we think, okay, I can't think, and I gotta, put it in this little box, it's probably going to yell louder because we're refusing it. So as they say, what we resist, we persist. So we're not needing to make an enemy of our thinking mind, but when we let everything be as it is, because we're now sensing into or feeling into being the silence, being the awareness, then everything doesn't have to fight so hard.
Yeah, because it was a battle, and I felt that my mind was blocking what might have happened if I had been silent.
Yeah, well, the silence was already there, and it was noticing how wild your mind was resisting. And that's part of it too. And that's where the more we are aware of this clarity that's clear about just the what is of life, not attaching to all of our interpretations and conditioning about it, but then I think it's naturally going to show itself in a simpler way, clearer way. Yeah.
Anyway, I just feel that this is like I've just stepped into a different place by having been here at this retreat. That there's I don't know what will happen, but
well, we never do. But I'm glad that it's felt useful or nurturing to some parts of yourself. Yeah.
Yes.
Great.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for letting us know. I mean, we won't need to go around to everybody, but if I were in person and we were having the end of a retreat time, we would have a closing circle where people could speak for a minute or two if they wanted. And I'm not going to say, okay, what do you want to say? But this is an opportunity for any of you who have something to say in the closing moments of our retreat, that be open to hearing those. Or anything that seemed to resonate with you or not, Sometimes the closing thoughts are, this just didn't work for me, and that's okay too. So we all have unique experiences.
I'll say something.
Good.
I don't know if it's so personal for me. I just wanted to really thank you for this chance. I've heard about you via John Prendergast, whom I met in various coach training venues, and then I've read his books and such. But I wanted to go to what felt like go back in his lineage and explore. So I this is why I almost didn't say anything. So many things that you've said were clicked, notably about the mind, that it's not an enemy, nor is it just a random thing to observe like a bug. It's actually part of all of this, just like anything else is. It feels a little more lovingly included.
Good.
Yeah, which is it seems like I can say that in one sentence, but it makes it's such a big aha.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
One of the early things Adyashanti said to me around this kind of issue, he said, the world needs an enlightened mind.
I don't know if I have an enlightened mind, but
Well, I mean, we're talking
have-
about mind versus, you know, some other way of looking at it.
Right.
Do you know? And so when we begin to befriend the whole of ourself, the mind is certainly part of that.
Yeah.
Do you know? And it's part of the creation of our life and our day and everything else. Do you know?
And I think I had gone from it rules me to it's bad. Just if I could just get rid of this.
Mm-hmm.
And the next stage was more like it's a necessary evil, kind of, but like just ignore it. Just ignore it.
Take away the evil part. I mean,
yes. I mean, but not that it's lovingly included. That's a whole different ballgame.
Good. I hope it can be lovingly included, because the mind is it's not the source, but it's an incredible servant to source. It can be. Do you know? It thinks it's the God for however long, but actually, in its best rendition of itself, it becomes a servant of truth, you know, and so we don't exclude it, but we're also not ruled by it.
Right.
And it doesn't have to be evil or bad. Do you know? It's just mind. It's just thinking. It's just doing what the mind does. Do you know? And sometimes it's creative in beautiful ways, and you write a poem and this or that, you know, and the mind is engaged, you know, but the felt sense of where it's coming from can be that deeper place, right?
When it's the tool, not
exactly,
the doer.
The servant and not the God, the tool and not the whole thing.
There have been several other sort of ahas I'm still digesting, but that's the one I could articulate. But I just wanted to say thank you for your presence and your words.
It's good to meet you. And of course, you know, John and I are quite close and share the lineage that we do. So I'm glad you came.
So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I'll piggyback on what Elizabeth was talking about. When I've been looking at my conditioned mind or a piece of conditioning, say judgmentalness or something, and it used to be bad, and then I just noticed, and then it got really boring, and I've asked it what it wanted, but not with a lot of heart. You know, it's like, and now what? You know, kind of question. So I really appreciated your energy and your words this weekend to you know, I've heard about the loving the judgmentalness. I didn't quite understand what that meant. Not with my mind, but with my heart. Like, how does that work? And this weekend I got a taste for it being like just part of the zeitgeist. Like, yeah, it's here. And I don't know how long it's going to stay. And I don't know if it'll ever go away. And I'm not really acting on it anymore, but it's not boring anymore. I'm more curious.
Well, I think I mean, the curiosity is lovely. And I wanted to follow up with you. When you asked the judgment, what did it want? Mm-hmm. What did you discover about that?
You know, this cuts very close to the bone, but I loved what you said today. It made so much sense that in the act of rebelling, what we give up sometimes is belonging, and what it wants is to belong. You know, that's what any of my conditioning can pretty much drill down to.
Return to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, when I think about what does the judgment really want, a lot of times I think well, one, it's just used to commenting on the passing scene. Okay, it's like the tour guide, you know. So sometimes it's innocuous in that respect. But then there are ways in which the judging mind actually wants to be right. Do you know? I know what should be, and you aren't that, or this moment wasn't that. Do you know? And so it's a way that we hold on to the identification with separation. Do you know? And that may be part of its of what it brings. You know, not in a necessarily positive way if we're a spiritual seeker, but when you begin to see it just for what it is and not believe it. Do you know? You don't have to believe that your judgments are truth, because there's no thought that is truth. No thought, none. You know, it doesn't mean that there aren't beautiful thoughts or horrendous thoughts or whatever. You know, thoughts are thoughts, and when you look into it, you know, like putting your head in the demon's mouth, you know, they may very well be seen to be pretty empty of self. Empty of self. Because this mystery to me is it's empty of self and it's empty of definition. And that's what emptiness means when I think about emptiness. You know, it doesn't mean bereft of you know, anything really, but it's empty of definition and empty of self. And so judgments are like that too, if we have the eye to see it, you know, to really look into the matter.
Judge, you just said judgments are empty of, or I didn't get that.
It's okay.
You know, when you said, you know, you want the judgmentalness a lot wants to be right, it underneath that it wants to be right is it wants to know.
Sure thing.
It's a knowing. Yeah.
Well, and this is like, I mean, it's part of accepting how we're wired as well. I went through a period many years ago where all my friends, whatever, I was asking them, okay, why do you think you're here? It was all about, you know, okay, what's your purpose in being here? And, you know, for me, it was like to learn how to love. That's how I answered that question way back when. And I remember taking a walk with a friend of mine who was a psychiatrist. And I said, well, what are you here for? What, you know? She said, well, I'm here to know, you know, and she had that scientific mind, and that was her talent. That was her love, that was her passion, do you know? And we would take walks, and she would know the names of all the wildflowers, and sometimes I would just wish that we could just not have to have the names of all the wild. But it was also something I so appreciated because it was just how she was wired. So part of it is accepting, you know, how we are. Colette, you had your hand up, and we don't have much time, so I want to get to you.
Thank you so much. I took the theme conditioning was exactly, or is exactly, my theme since a while. So it brought me a lot. You are teaching from a place that reached me very profoundly. Thanks a lot. And I felt like I've received a lot of tools that I'm going to explore. There were a lot of tools for me for these 2 days, although I'm very well known with meditation. I do it since a long time. But the tools you gave me, I really appreciate, and I look forward to go deeper into my my research.
Beautiful, beautiful. I'm glad you
But I
found something
also-
useful. Go ahead.
I wanted to much appreciate not only from this beautiful place of nourishing and truth from where you are teaching, but also your lovely humor. Thank you so much.
You are quite welcome. We are out of time. I believe it's time to pack up our bags, so to speak, shut down our computers, go about your life. But it's been a real pleasure to be with all of you, and I so appreciate your presence, and I appreciate all of you who contributed what you did, even if it was silent for the most part. But those of you who spoke and shared experience, I always appreciate at that part. And I want to thank Open Circle and you, Sarah, for the invitation to do one of these. The last I guess it was a couple day thing that I did with Open Circle was around Halloween. And I remember I came with a horrendous mask one morning, which was, it was quite fun. But I always appreciate you, Sarah, and how you are such a lovely host. So thank you very much for what you do for Open Circle and what you've given to us in these 3 days. So do you have anything any announcements you want to make before we leave, Sarah?
I would like to thank you, first of all, for your very kind words. And I'm in so much great gratitude and appreciation for our time together, for your sharings and teachings, Dorothy, for everyone's contribution. It's been so lovely being here with you. And I would love to invite you for more with Open Circle. We are hosting wonderful teachers every week, pretty much. So we are starting a 4-part retreat with Pamela Wilson tomorrow, for example. Mm-hmm. I've just put the link in the chat. The title is Being Here as Strength, Clarity, and Love. And
there's that word again, that word clarity. Yahoo! You can just continue on with your exploration.
Exactly. And Pamela's work is just wonderful as well. It's a different flavor, but just very rich, very, very much about integrating very subtle, human, challenging places with that awareness that we're speaking of. So you may want to continue tomorrow. The link is in the chat. And I wanted to ask you, Dorothy, if you have any announcements, if you'd like to announce any of your upcoming events, perhaps.
Bless your heart. If any of you might be interested in being on the Moon Mountain Sangha mailing list, you can go to our website, dorothyhunt.org. And we do send out a monthly newsletter by email that always has a message from me. So I get to do some writing for that, and also we'll tell about events. And I did mention briefly this day-long that's coming up called The Wonder of Being. I think it's October the 8th, something like that. And I'll let you in on a little secret. That particular event is part of my way of celebrating my 80th birthday, which is that week. Can you believe? I can't believe 80 years, but that's the wonder. Yeah, right. The wonder of being has happened for 80 years in this form. So that's part of my own celebration that I want to share with anyone who's interested, but it won't be about me and being 80 so much as just exploring the wonder of being itself. But anyway, feel free to sign up for the newsletter on the website, and I hope to see some of you again in some fashion somewhere, and appreciate once again just being together. So thank you, and until next time, be well.
Thank you so much. I want to say if anyone would like to unmute and share a goodbye, a thank you, you are very welcome to. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye,
Thanks,
everyone.
Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you, Dorothy. Thank you all.
Thank you,
everybody. Yeah.
Thanks to everyone.
Thanks, everyone.